Freezing rain, a dead-end street in Paris, and not a single taxi in sight. That is the exact moment the traditional economy began to die. It was late 2008, and two entrepreneurs named Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp were stranded at a tech conference. As they shivered under the street lamps, struggling to find a ride, a simple, dangerous idea was born. What if you could just tap a button and a car would appear? It sounds like a basic convenience today, but back then, it was a declaration of war against an industry that had not changed in a century. At that moment, they weren't looking to build a multi-billion-dollar empire. They were just two rich guys fueled by pure, unadulterated spite for a broken system. They called it UberCab, a name that oozed arrogance and ambition. Little did they know, this tiny seed of frustration would grow into a global revolution that would shatter labor laws, rewrite urban landscapes, and turn the concept of ownership upside down. This wasn't just a startup. It was the beginning of a chaotic, high-speed collision between Silicon Valley and the real world. Welcome to the story of the most aggressive company ever built. Every revolution needs a general, and for Uber, that was Travis Kalanick. To understand Uber, you have to understand the man at the helm. Kalanick was a serial entrepreneur who had already tasted both failure and the kind of success that leaves you hungry for more. He joined Garrett Camp, the technical visionary behind StumbleUpon, and Ryan Graves, the first employee who famously landed the job by replying to a tweet. Together, they were the three musketeers of the gig economy. But Kalanick was the one who provided the grit. He didn't just want to provide a service, he wanted to break things. These men viewed the world through a lens of efficiency, and they saw the taxi industry as a bloated, corrupt fossil. They started small in San Francisco in 2010, with just a few black cars and a simple iPhone app. Back then, Uber was an exclusive club for the tech elite, a luxury service that made you feel like a movie star. But the goal was never just black cars. The goal was to prove that technology could bypass the government-mandated taxi medallions that kept the supply of rides artificially low. They were playing a game of chess while the rest of the world was playing checkers, and their first move was to ignore every rule in the book. In October 2010, just months after launching, the law finally caught up with them. The San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency slapped UberCab with a cease and desist order. The accusations were clear. They were operating an unlicensed taxi service. In any other business, this would be a moment for panic, a time to shut down and hire a PR firm. But Travis Kalanick saw it as an opportunity. He did something that would define Uber's DNA forever. He simply ignored it. He dropped the word cab from the name, becoming just Uber, and kept the cars on the road. This was the principled confrontation strategy. Kalanick believed that if customers loved the service, no politician would dare take it away. They weren't just fighting the law, they were weaponizing their own users. Every time a city tried to ban them, Uber would send out an alert to its app, prompting thousands of people to call their local representatives. It was a masterclass in guerrilla marketing and political pressure. They turned a legal battle into a public movement, making the government look like a bunch of stick-in-the-muds trying to stop progress. This ask for forgiveness, not permission attitude became the company's superpower, but eventually it would also become its greatest curse. How does a company lose $1 billion every 3 months and still become the most valuable startup on Earth? The answer lies in surge pricing. This was Uber's secret weapon, an algorithm designed to balance supply and demand in real time. If there were too many riders and not enough drivers, the price would skyrocket. To an economist, it was beautiful, a pure expression of the free market. But to the average passenger stuck in the rain, it felt like price gouging. Uber didn't care about the optics. They were focused on the data. They realized that by subsidizing rides, they could drive every competitor out of business. During these years, Uber was burning through venture capital cash at an unprecedented rate. They were basically paying you to take a ride, with investors like Benchmark and Google Ventures footing the bill. The strategy was blitzscaling. Grow so fast and become so essential that you are too big to fail before the money runs out. It was a race against the clock, and a race against rival startups like Lyft. Every city became a battlefield, and every driver became a soldier in a war of attrition. But as the company grew to a valuation of over $60 billion, the internal culture began to rot, and the man at the top was oblivious to the fire he had started. As Uber expanded globally, they encountered regulators who were much tougher than those in California. To fight back, Uber's engineers developed a top-secret tool known as Greyball. This was software designed to identify and evade government officials. When a city inspector tried to hail an Uber to stage a sting operation, the app would show them a ghost version of the map with no cars or simply cancel their ride. It was a digital invisibility cloak. They even tracked the locations of government offices to ensure that anyone opening the app in those areas was flagged as a potential threat. This was no longer just a ride-sharing app. It was a high-tech intelligence agency. This period marked the height of Uber's arrogance. They truly believed they were above the law, and for a while, they were. They launched in cities where they were explicitly banned, like London and Seoul, daring the authorities to stop them. But the win-at-all-costs culture was creating a toxic environment inside the San Francisco headquarters. Stories of harassment, cutthroat competition, and a complete lack of oversight began to leak out. The public's perception of Uber began to shift from the cool startup to the corporate villain. The tech rebel was becoming the empire, and the cracks were starting to show. The beginning of the end for the Kalanick era didn't come from a regulator or a competitor. It came from a blog post. In early 2017, a former Uber engineer named Susan Fowler published a harrowing account of her time at the company. She described a culture of systemic sexism, where harassment was ignored by HR because the perpetrators were high performers. This wasn't just a scandal, it was an earthquake. It pulled back the curtain on the bro culture that had driven Uber's growth but poisoned its soul. Suddenly, the hashtag #DeleteUber began to trend globally. Hundreds of thousands of users uninstalled the app in a matter of days. The board of directors could no longer look the other way. They brought in former Attorney General Eric Holder to conduct an investigation, and the results were devastating. The report recommended a total overhaul of the company's leadership and values. Kalanick, who had just lost his mother in a tragic accident, was under immense personal and professional pressure. The man who had built Uber in his own image was now the very thing standing in the way of its survival. The board's biggest investors staged a coup, and in a dramatic late-night showdown, they forced the founder to step down as CEO. The king was dead, but the kingdom was in shambles. After the chaos of 2017, Uber needed a grown-up in the room. Entered Dara Khosrowshahi, the former CEO of Expedia. If Kalanick was the wartime general, Khosrowshahi was the diplomat. He inherited a company facing hundreds of lawsuits, a massive data breach cover-up, and a looming ban in its most profitable city, London. His mission was simple but nearly impossible: move from growth at all costs to responsible growth. He famously traveled the world on an apology tour, meeting with mayors and regulators to promise that Uber would be a better partner. He introduced new safety features, like the emergency button and driver background checks, which had been neglected during the aggressive expansion years. He also had to prepare the company for its IPO. To do this, he had to prune the wilder parts of the business. He sold off the expensive self-driving car division and the flying taxi project, focusing on the core business of moving people and food. The reckless pirate ship was being turned into a steady cargo vessel. But the question remained, could a nice Uber ever actually be profitable? The company had spent nearly 10 years losing money, and the public markets were about to put that business model to the ultimate test. In May 2019, Uber finally went public on the New York Stock Exchange. It was one of the most anticipated IPOs in history, but it ended up being a bloodbath. The stock price tanked on the first day, causing billions of dollars in losses for investors. It was a waking nightmare for Silicon Valley. The market was sending a clear message. The era of free money for money-losing startups was over. Uber was no longer a tech miracle. It was a transportation company with high overhead and razor-thin margins. To survive, they had to find a way to make the numbers work. This led to a massive pivot toward Uber Eats. As it turns out, moving a burrito is often more profitable than moving a person. During the pandemic, this shift saved the company. While rides plummeted, delivery soared. But this new model created its own set of problems, specifically the classification battle. Are drivers employees or independent contractors? This legal question became the new front line of Uber's war. From California's Proposition 22 to European Union regulations, the company spent hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying to keep their gig worker model alive. The rebel was now part of the establishment, fighting to protect the very system it had disrupted a decade earlier. Uber's legacy is a paradox. It is a story of incredible convenience built on a foundation of intense conflict. They didn't just build an app, they changed the way we live. Think about it. The Uberization of the economy has touched everything from healthcare to laundry to home repairs. We now live in an on-demand world where friction is the ultimate sin. But that convenience came with a price. It sparked global debates about the future of work, the livability of cities, and the ethics of algorithmic management. Uber taught a generation of entrepreneurs that if you have enough capital and enough courage, you can ignore the rules until the rules change to fit you. It proved that technology could move faster than the law, but it also proved that culture eventually catches up with you. Today, Uber is a leaner, more focused company that is finally starting to see real profits. It survived the scandals, the pandemic, and the departure of its founder. It is no longer the reckless rebel, but a global utility. The chaotic ride of Travis Kalanick may be over, but the world he created, for better or worse, is the one we all live in now. When was the last time you actually looked at the price of your ride? You aren't just paying for a car, you're paying for the most expensive lesson in business history. I hope this deep dive gave you a new perspective on the strategies and the relentless mindset behind these global icons. If you enjoy deconstructing business empires and tech legends in this tech archive style, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. That way, you will never miss a new blueprint of history. For those of you ready to explore more boardroom coups and technological breakthroughs, I have handpicked 2 videos for you right here on the screen. Click one to keep watching. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.